It starts with a routine traffic stop, a driver who says nothing, and a small detail officers are trained never to ignore. What began as a simple equipment violation became a documented investigation, not because of what was said, but because of what was visible. Tonight, we follow the exact moment procedure changed direction. Routine enforcement actions are the foundation of roadway safety. Every traffic stop begins with a single observable condition, a violation, a safety concern, or a regulatory irregularity. Most encounters conclude within minutes. Identification is verifying, documentation is issued. The driver continues on their way. But routine procedure isn't just about resolving violations, it's designed to identify inconsistencies. Officers are trained to observe conditions that may require verification before a vehicle is cleared for continued operation. This episode examines a stop that followed standard protocol at every single stage. No confrontation occurred. No force was used. The encounter evolved solely through observation, verification, and documentation. At approximately 9:14 p.m., a patrol officer observed a dark-colored sedan traveling along a two-lane roadway with non-operational rear illumination. Under traffic safety regulations, functioning rear lights are required for nighttime operation to ensure visibility and signaling to surrounding traffic. The officer activated the emergency lights. The vehicle responded promptly. It slowed gradually and pulled to the shoulder. Dash camera footage shows no erratic driving, no attempt to evade, and no sudden movements. The officer approached the vehicle according to established safety protocol. Standard steps included a visual scan of the interior, assessment of occupant movement, and positioning outside the driver's window to explain the observed violation. Body camera audio records a con and controlled exchange. The officer says, "Good evening. The reason for the stop is a rear light malfunction. May I see your license and registration?" The driver replies, "I'm not answering questions and I don't consent to searches." The driver provided identification, a declined further dialogue. This response is lawful. Assertion of rights does not alter procedural duties. At this stage, the stop remained routine and administrative. Traffic stops involve simultaneous responsibilities, communication, safety awareness, and environmental observation. Officers are trained to observe details without presumption of wrongdoing. While documenting the equipment violation, the officer noted one condition requiring attention: the trunk was not fully secure. It was partially open, not enough to expose contents clearly, but sufficient to reveal the presence of covered cargo. The officer did not manipulate the trunk. No entry into the vehicle occurred. The observation was made from a lawful position outside the vehicle. The officer requested dispatch confirmation of the vehicle registration, ownership record, and vehicle identification number. Routine enforcement had now transitioned into verification. The driver remained calm, composed, and consistent in asserting his legal rights. He declined to answer questions not directly related to the issuance of a citation. The officer stated, "I am verifying documentation required for roadway operation." The driver responded, "I'm not engaging in questions." The officer simply said, "Understood." Professional procedure doesn't depend on voluntary conversation. Officers must complete documentation requirements regardless of a subject's willingness to participate. The driver's demeanor did not escalate the encounter. The officer's tone remained neutral. The interaction remained controlled. However, verification had become necessary before the stop could conclude. Dispatch returned preliminary information concerning the vehicle. The record indicated a recent administrative update to the registration, an ownership status requiring confirmation, and no immediate stolen vehicle alert. The information didn't establish wrongdoing. It simply required verification before the vehicle could be clear. The officer informed the driver that documentation confirmation was necessary for roadway compliance. The driver's response was silence. At this stage, three independent factors existed. 1. An equipment violation initiating a lawful stop. 2. An ownership record requiring verification. And 3. A partially secured trunk revealing structured cargo. Each factor was routine in isolation, but together, they required structured verification. A secondary unit arrived as standard support during administrative confirmation procedures. With the driver asked to step outside for documentation review, officers maintained observation from outside vantage points only. Using a flashlight to illuminate the trunk gap without touching the vehicle, officers observed additional details beneath the covering. Visible items included stacked metal plates bearing numbering, adhesive materials, and hand tools consistent with the attachment or removal of external identifiers. No items were handled at this stage. No interpretation was expressed. Visual documentation was simply recorded. Observation alone doesn't determine outcome, it determines the next procedural step. Department guidelines allow administrative inspection when vehicle custody cannot be verified and relevant materials are in plain view. The trunk was opened with the driver present. Upon opening it, officers conducted methodical documentation. The process followed a defined sequence: photographic documentation of placement, controlled removal of items, recording of identifying marks, and dispatch cross-reference. Recovered items included multiple license identifiers not assigned to the vehicle, packaging materials, adhesive backing components, and a portable engraving device. Each item was documented prior to handling. The driver made no statements regarding ownership of the materials. No questioning was pursued after his rights were asserted. The investigation proceeded through documentation alone. Evidence management at the roadside serves a limited function: preservation and recording. The determination of legal significance happens through subsequent review. However, certain factors increase evidentiary relevance: the presence of multiple identification markers, inconsistency with vehicle registration, and the inability to verify lawful custody. These factors don't establish intent, they establish the necessity for review. Serial markings recorded from the recovered items were transmitted to dispatch for cross-reference with administrative records. The encounter remained calm and procedural. The direction of the encounter changed during identifier cross-verification. One recovered identifier corresponded with documentation from a previously recorded administrative case involving disputed vehicle markings. This match didn't establish criminal liability, it established documented relevance. This was the moment the encounter transitioned from roadside verification to a structured investigation. The officer notified supervisory personnel. Documentation was finalized. Evidence chain procedures were initiated. No escalation occurred. No confrontation occurred. The outcome was determined by confirmation, not conflict. Because ownership and vehicle identification could not be confirmed at the roadside, the vehicle could not be cleared for continued operation. The driver received written documentation explaining the basis for administrative retention, the verification procedures, and his rights regarding property and review. Recovered materials were logged into evidence following chain of custody protocol. The roadside interaction concluded without arrest or physical force. The official classification or routine traffic enforcement action resulting in the discovery of documentation irregularities requiring formal review. Modern law enforcement procedure is designed around three principles: observation precedes action, verification precedes conclusion, documentation precedes outcome. This encounter illustrates each principle in sequence. Observation of an equipment violation initiated contact. Observation of irregular conditions required verification. Verification produced documentation. Documentation produced an investigation. The driver's assertion of rights remained intact at every stage. Procedure continue, independent of dialogue. Routine enforcement environments create conditions where small inconsistencies become visible. The controlled structure of a traffic stop allows for systematic observation that doesn't occur during ordinary travel. Factors contributing to the discovery include the stationary positioning of the vehicle, illumination of exterior surfaces, verification of documentation, and the structured interaction sequence. Discovery doesn't occur through confrontation. Discovery occurs through attention to detail. Body camera footage demonstrates consistent procedural conduct. Voice tone remained neutral, instructions remained clear, and documentation remained methodical. The encounter exemplifies controlled enforcement protocol in a non-adversarial environment. Professional procedure is defined not by outcome, but by process integrity. Subsequent administrative review determined the driver was not the registered owner. The vehicle identification required formal documentation analysis, and administrative violations were recorded pending review. The case proceeded through structured investigative channels beyond the roadside interaction. The initial stop concluded exactly as procedure required. A malfunctioning rear light initiated contact. A partially secured trunk required awareness. Ownership verification required documentation. Visible materials required recording. Recorded identifiers required review. Each step followed from observation alone. No assumption created the investigation. No confrontation created the investigation. Procedure created the investigation. In structured environments, outcome is determined by process. A driver asserted his rights and remained silent. Officers followed procedure and documented what was visible. What began as a routine traffic stop became a structured investigation, not through conflict, but through observation. And in procedural systems, observation determines direction. Routine calls are documented every day. Most are closed and filed. Some change everything. If you value evidence over assumptions and procedure over speculation, subscribe to Incident, Uncover, and enable notifications. New episodes examine real investigated processes step by step so you can see how routine encounters become documented discoveries. Until the next case is review, stay observant.